Okay, welcome everybody
Oops, sorry.
to our admin meeting for Thursday, February 16th. Annie, do you want to do a little roll call?
Absolutely. Online, we have Andrew Brony, Carrie Powers, Emmy Bristow, Jason Emery, John Hart, Kaylee Becker, Karen Hughes, Kyla Leonards, Melissa Fisher, Violet Plummer, MCAT, and Todd is a guest. Todd, can I grab your last name just for roll call? Maybe Todd left us. Okay. In 206, we have Commissioner Slotnick and Strohmeyer, Chris Lounsbury, Ann Hughes, Allison France, Annie Kathy, and Sarah Bell.
Great, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, let's jump to the consent agenda. Is there anything on that consent agenda we should pull out and talk about? Anybody like to speak on it?
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, good, thanks, Dave. Okay, Sarah, we have an action item for you.
I do.
That's wonderful.
This is a really straightforward professional services agreement with Human Resource Council. So we've had this agreement with them since 2018. Missoula County has a fund established to provide assistance to folks who need IDs, so driver's license, birth certificates, state IDs, driver's licenses. So that fund is something the Grants and Communities Department manages, but Human Resource Council is the agency that vets individuals to see if they qualify for the funding. And so that's what this agreement is for. And there was some outdated language, and then the staff contacts were outdated. And then also we needed to include real IDs as a form of identification that's covered by this funding because they're becoming more of a need and requirement. So it's really a pretty straightforward just update of a longstanding relationship with HRC, but Ruth is now the director over there, so we updated her contact in the contract as well and had her approval of the whole program. So
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Mhm.
It's pretty hard for a person to navigate life without an ID.
It is, yep. And I think in 2021, 22, they got this fund has an additional $7,000 from ARPA dollars, so the fund has some cushion to exist longer than it had in the past. So
It's great.
yeah, and
Sarah, does that main funding come from the prescription cards?
it
Am I
does,
remembering
yeah.
that correctly?
So, and that's one reason I think ARPA funds went into this, because those prescription cards are becoming less and less commonly used. And so the fund was not regenerating income like it used to. And so with the ARPA funding, it just helps sustain it for a longer period of time.
How long will it sustain?
It was a $7,000 deposit into the fund, and right now we're sitting around $5,000. So it'll be for quite a while. We're hoping that, so the threshold used to be that people were at 60% of AMI to qualify for this program, and that's been bumped up to 80%. So we're hoping it will serve more people through that. And then also HRC works directly with the DMP services and has a kind of like an escrow fund set up with them. So they can just refer clients over there and then they get reimbursed for that cost that way. And then we reimburse HRC, but we made the language a little more broad in the PSA to include driver's license service agencies in the hope that we could work with MVD Express in the future.
Great.
Because clients prefer to go there because it's a quicker turnaround. If someone's needing an ID, it's usually needed in a short term turnaround. And so been playing phone and tag with MVD Express for a long time and still hoping that that will work out, but their services are just so much more accessible and a quick turnaround. So
Good flexibility on your part.
Yeah.
Look there.
So the main changes in the contract is to include the real IDs and to make that language more broad, and then to update the staff contacts.
Good, I move that we approve the PSA.
All right, all in favor? All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah, good work.
I'll stay.
Yeah. Sure, you guys.
Thank you.
It appears we have some correspondence.
We do, and I think Karen is on to discuss the first letter. I also make sure it's-
Morning, commissioners.
Hey.
So this is a response to, just a second, I'm trying to find it. Mr. Baxter, who's come to two of your public meetings recently. The first being on the first meeting in January, and then at the last commissioner public meeting on the 9th. We've put together, we've taken a couple of different approaches, and I have staff from building and environmental health. Gina's here, Rita's here, and Nick is here. They've all, and it looks like Dave's trying to sign on. So just a second, I'm going to try and invite him to the meeting. There was some confusion about this. So the issue, Mr. Baxter is frustrated because he wants to place there is an existing manufactured home on his property that is not on a permanent foundation. He wants to add a mobile home to his property. And the process to do that and avoid the subdivision process is to have one of those structures on a permanent foundation, or make one of them not a mobile or manufactured home, but a stick-built home on a permanent foundation. In addition, since this all began, the building department has discovered that there's an outstanding open building permit for a garage. We received a complaint from a neighbor that someone is living in that structure, which I was able to confirm with Mr. Baxter that there is someone living in that unfinished garage where the permits haven't been closed out, nor was it intended for residential use. And then there are open sanitation issues that need to be resolved. So for planning, we need one of those structures to be on a permanent foundation to avoid subdivision review, and then we need zoning compliance. For building, they need to get the permits dealt with for the garage, but then they'll need a new electrical hookup, and if he puts it on a permanent foundation, they'll need a permit for that as well. And then health has their requirements. What we did was we put it all in one letter, a joint letter from all three departments, and we're suggesting that the commission write a cover letter to acknowledge that Mr. Baxter's come and that you've worked with all the permitting agencies to figure out what needs to be done. And then what we really probably need to do is strongly encourage him to actually meet with us in person to get all of his issues resolved. You know, invariably, each individual conversation, only bits and pieces are being picked up and getting through, and we're not getting complete resolution. And, you know, there may be ways to further address any issues if we can all get in the same room and just get it resolved. He's a truck driver, and so he doesn't have a lot of time when he's available, but he has been able to come to the commissioners' meetings twice. I know he had to take time off to do that. And I when I talked to him last Thursday, I gave him an overview of what would be coming in the letter from us, and strongly suggested that we find a way to get him in the same room with us and work through all the issues. So what you have is a draft cover letter with our joint letter. And we're all here to answer questions.
Thanks for doing this. And I think we're happy to write a cover letter and invite him to come in person, and we can work together to get him where he needs to be.
Yes, I concur. No questions for me. Thanks for sticking with this.
Yeah.
And hopefully this will, hopefully we'll be successful in meeting with them in person.
Hopefully. That, you know, his one thing that you should be, I think probably comes out in the letter, but just so you're clear, the existing home is a manufactured home. The problem is it's not attached to the ground, and that's clear in the Department of Revenue records. It's not on a permanent foundation. It's not just that it's not a mobile home, it's also that it's not connected to the ground. That's the trigger point for some of the problems that he's dealing with. So he's relying on the fact that DR is telling him it's a manufactured home. He's missing the piece that it's not just that, but it also needs to be on a permanent foundation that's causing the challenge for him.
Has that been described to him in the past, and he's just not quite understanding?
Yes, I think multiple folks have described that, but I'll let Nick and others speak if they.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot more to add on that, but yeah, we've definitely described it multiple times. But I think with one of the hard things about communicating with Mr. Baxter is he kind of hones in on certain aspects of his project and neglects other aspects that we bring up. So it kind of cherry picking various parts of state law and our regulations and not looking at it as a whole. But yeah, we've definitely communicated multiple times, and I've showed him where it says that on the Department of Revenue website that he is in fact not on a permanent foundation. Excuse me, not on a foundation.
Would it be worth having someone from DOR in that meeting to avoid this kind of triangulation where he goes to DOR, thinks he's understanding the solution, and then using that as the basis for critiquing our position? But if you had someone with DOR in the room at the same time, then perhaps they could say, the issue really is with regardless of whether you're in a mobile home or not, this thing has to be connected per Missoula County's direction to a foundation, or would that just muddy the waters with having yet another party in the room?
I don't, you know, like DOR doesn't care if it's on a permanent foundation or not. That's our local issue and state issue that DOR doesn't have anything to do with. So that's, I mean, we could.
I guess
that
it's
might
more,
help him. I don't know, like, I'm not even sure. We can see if DOR would be willing to do that.
I guess it's more, yeah, I anticipate that they will say that's a Missoula County issue, but having that having Mr. Baxter hear that from DOR rather than just selectively hearing that DOR defines my dwelling unit as such, so it shouldn't be an issue. I don't know. It's just, you just don't want to have any. Ideally, it could be a definitive meeting where everyone who needs to be in the room is there.
Yeah.
Think
We can
about it.
certainly look at that possibility.
Thanks.
One
It's a
thing,
good idea.
worth mentioning from the building department is that I was just looking at the CAMA, and the garage that is currently being used as a dwelling unit and not approved to be used as such was originally received a stop work order from, gosh, I think Steve Hutchins back in the day. And that has never been brought to fruition, never been finalized out. And that permit is expired, obviously, right now. CAMA does not show that on. And then he has also moved that other trailer that he's trying to get put on. It's already on the property. Also not listed on CAMA or Department of Revenue. So easy to point out our faults and failings and not handling this very well. But I think we've done our part, especially where all three departments have actually worked really well together on this, and tried to communicate with him. But I do think an in-person meeting would benefit everyone.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Allison, we have another letter to the Lolo National Forest.
Kaylee's on to talk about this one.
Yes, I am. Thanks everybody I want to just call out specifically Allison and Annie were super helpful in pulling all this together kind of at the last minute. So thank you. This is a comment letter for the Lolo National Forest's proposed project to implement a shaded fuel break in the Graves to Granite Creek area that's off of Highway 12, just to the north of Highway 12. And so it would be along some of the Forest Service roads in that area. And I wrote up this comment letter, which has been reviewed by ComStaff and Chet as well. And it focuses on some of the higher level pieces of it, given that this is at the scoping stage. and specifically wanted to call out that they did put in their scoping notice that they are considering a categorical exclusion for this, but we're open to comments, suggestions if that wasn't appropriate. So we did include the suggestion that if they do go with a categorical exclusion, they increase some of their typical engagement over what would be required. That is all I've got, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thanks for working.
Yeah,
on it.
thanks for working on it. Thanks for putting it together quickly.
Yes, I, as far as the CADX versus, EA or heightened public involvement CADX, I think as recent history has shown, it's always best for them to err on the side of more
Yeah.
public involvement rather than less.
Absolutely. I have wondered whether it's the
That's well said.
Yeah.
Okay, well said.
thing where it's the CADX, the family transfer, or the four-way stop that people often push just a little too far. You can be taken.
3 levels of public policy.
Yeah.
It's always pushed a little farther than.
Yeah.
So, thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, I love these tidy little meetings. Appears we're done.
Legislative update.
Oh, legislative update. I
Yeah.
love the legislative update.
Okay.
Yeah,
About the
we never
legislative-
talk about the legislative.
legislation. So just 2 bills to put on your radar, and also to mention for the public, Josh, you're going to be testifying on House Bill 462, which changes the way statewide marijuana funds are distributed. So you'll be testifying on that today, supporting more money going towards the Heart Fund, which helps with a variety of programs, but also pushing back on the idea of moving funding out of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks towards Habitat Montana. And then the other bill, just for you guys to be aware of, there, as you recall in the last legislative session, there was some moves around local governments being able to lobby. There's a bill that we don't think will have much impact in Missoula County because we try to be transparent, and the whole legislative team, but in particular, Anne, our intern, and Allison and her crew, I do very little of this particular part of it and want to make sure that they get credit for it. Already put all of the information on bills that we're lobbying out to the public. There's a link on the county's webpage that takes you to the blog where we record all of the comments that we send about given pieces of legislation that we're tracking throughout the session. This bill would in essence require us to post on our website the bills that we're lobbying on, which we already do, as well as our legislative our lobbying contract for the legislature, which we already do. So we don't think it will really have any impact on ours. So we'll probably stay out of it because we're already erring on the side of as much transparency as we can provide to folks. But those are the 2 that we know of on Thursday.
Wow. So multiple meetings yesterday, and this wasn't the subject of any of those conversations. People brought up Mr. Hertz's bill that would make it so levies that had been voted in would have to be re-voted on again.
Yeah, so there were 3 bills that Mr. Hertz sponsored on the same day. I believe that was yesterday that all 3 of those were heard. So there was one that was specifically to do with voted levies, and so that would require that voted levies be revoted every 6 years, and it did have a retroactive date. So any current existing levies would do that. There were, to put it mildly, an extensive list of carve-outs for what those are. So one of the challenges I think with that bill is really what's left actually as having to be revoted. Right now, it was set to carve out law enforcement, so public safety, set to carve out libraries, set to carve out, gosh, I can't remember. There were just a host. It was a numerous number of things that would actually be carved out, which left folks wondering what would be left, for example, that folks would have to still vote on every 6 years. Then there was one that dealt specifically with bond. So Anne's pulling them up, and I'm going to look over her shoulder here. So then there was one that would specifically change the threshold for voted mills. So it would require at least a 40% voter turnout. And if there was at least a 40% voter turnout, then the threshold would continue to be 50%. So as long as more than 50% voted for it, it would pass. If the threshold fell below 40%, then it would go to 60%. And then if it fell below 30%, I believe it was just dead. If I remember correctly, how that particular bill would work, which for counties We hit that threshold, just generally speaking, because there are usually federal or state elections occurring on our ballots, but those thresholds would be particularly difficult for schools, which usually see a voter turnout of around 30%. In theirs, or for example, municipalities typically see voter turnout in the 30%. So it would be very challenging for them to cross the thresholds where they would be able to have successful bond elections or mill elections. And what was the last one?
It's those are two different bills, one
Oh,
for mill levies.
One for mills
bonds.
and one for bonds, and I ran them together. Sorry about
Oh.
that. So same voter thresholds.
Yeah.
And on the first bill that you had mentioned, Josh, it says B251 for the record, and even the entities that were carved out in the amended or in the language of the bill showed up and testified in opposition, not all of them, but some, making the point that even if we're not included in this, when you make collecting revenue a challenge for other areas, it's the balloon, it's the squeezing the
Yeah,
balloon, right?
yeah.
You're gonna make it harder in one
Yeah.
area, so we're likely to be impacted as well. So there was some good testimony in that bill.
What do you guys, let's make a prediction, but how well was it received?
Yeah, as I say, there were good questions from the committee. I don't know. I think, yeah, it will be interesting to see where they go. I think they're all challenging for different reasons.
Were there any folks who were testifying against this that came from rural Montana?
Yes. Yeah.
That's good. I just cursory acquaintance with this. It would be really difficult for them too. They have to raise money as well.
Yeah. Next week, we believe is when we'll see the same sort of move for special districts. And then also TIFs will be next week because we head in towards the transmittal deadlines. We are rapidly heading towards transmittal next week. And keeps reminding me, I keep thinking it's this Friday, but it's actually next Friday is the last day the general bills can be introduced. And then there's the following week is when transmittal.
So some moves to tighten up the sunset dates on TIFs.
Moves to tighten up the sunset dates. There's at least one bill that is looking to remove schools from being included in TIFs and in the mills that get captured in a TIF. So in essence, it would remove school districts from the TIF.
Did TEDs apply as well?
Have not seen the actual language yet because they're just LCs, but I would imagine that they
so.
will be included, but I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, I think we're all done. See you later. Thanks for coming over.
Thanks for having me.